Hello and welcome to the second in the GRN podcast series. For members who attended and those who couldn't make it, we've recorded Tim Skeet and his excellent presentation advocating the benefits of hiring non-STEM graduates. Entitled Brains for Brexit, please listen on and hopefully you'll learn something new.
Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you also, Andrew, for hosting us today. Obviously, anything I say is in a very personal capacity. It comes as no surprise to you. It may surprise to you, be a surprise to you to see someone from the Bank of China here today. I very recently joined the bank, about 7 months ago. But we in the city are not very good at communications. And where I work today is perhaps even a little less good at communications in some ways. But I'm actually here not just because I wrote that letter, but I have been writing articles in financial news and in other journals for quite some time on this very subject. There's a little bit of counterintuitive thinking, and I'm not by any stretch of the imagination claiming I speak for my industry. But what I am trying to do as one of the longest serving members of my bit of the industry in the city is I am trying to get people to think again. And every now and again there is an opportunity for us to stand back and think once more clearly about what we want. Because I look back at a crisis which we all experienced 10 years ago, and we discovered that the city had made a series of very major mistakes. I don't even have the time today to talk about what those mistakes might have been. But certainly, as that letter suggests, as Dan summarized, I put some of what went wrong down to the fact that we suffered a massive groupthink problem. A lot of linear thinking, a lot of brilliant young men and women trusting their systems, trusting the data that they thought they were looking at, without sometimes stopping to ask the intelligent, right question, which any historian, linguist, English student, philosopher might well have asked. There was no one there to ask the question, hang about, run that past me again. But what do people really do in that situation? And one of the big things I'm passionate about is I look around all of the young boys and girls that come and work with me over the years. As I look around, I see people who are brilliant, clever, in some ways creative, and yet very narrowly focused, with degrees in maths, economics, sciences, but generally very poor in the soft skills. And in my view, that has had huge, huge implications for the whole of financial services. And I don't think I'm the only person to say that either. Now, let me just say very quickly, what do I do? What is my career? And I'm going to say that very simply, I will sum up what I did and what I continue to do as a professional in one sentence. I'm a financial institutions debt capital markets specialist. Now, has anybody here got a clue what I just said? There we go. One of, and you do? What's your background? Mizuho. Okay, fine. You're in the sector. You're in the zone. All right. He's in the zone as well, I discovered. But the trouble is, people outside our zone will not have a clue what that is. And frankly, we as an industry, and this is typical, no one has a clue what we do. And that is part of the problem that we have as an industry. How can people want to come into an industry that they haven't got a clue what it does? All they know from reading the newspapers is they caused a massive economic global meltdown and people get paid gazillions to turn up for work. That's what people think. That may not actually be necessarily true in many ways, but that's what people think. And I have to say, let's be clear, that is our fault. That is the fault of the industry that I have grown up in and worked in for nearly 40 years. But it's also the fault of the political class. It's also the fault of people, maybe in the universities, who are not asking. Maybe it's the careers people who are not trying to better understand what we want, or belatedly coming to that. Now, because I'm where I am in my career, I can afford to take the risk to come out here and talk to people like you, and I do quite a lot of external engagement because I actually feel very passionately that this is a vitally important function. Unfortunately, there are very few of my peer group that actually have an appetite to do it, and in many cases, even if they kind of wanted to, they won't. And many of them simply don't have the communication skills. Actually, one of the reasons that communication skills are a problem is that there are many very senior people in my industry for whom English is not their first language. And of course, in the title for the talk today, we have this dreadful B word, the B word that dominates all our headlines, that dominates all of our dinner table discussion. In fact, you look at the statistics, and it's difficult to get precise statistics, but at least a fifth of staff in the city are EU citizens. Anecdotally, from where I've worked, and I was at the Royal Bank of Scotland for 5 years before this, I worked for Merrill Lynch for about 5 years before that. Anecdotally, I would have said it's an even higher number. And if you look at total numbers of non-EU citizens working around me, I was in the position of being something of an ethnic minority. And I'm even a Londoner, so this is my hometown. I was born literally just down the road from here. Personally, as a Londoner, I've loved it. And by the way, my background academically was as a modern linguist. I studied German history, literature, philosophy and thought, and a bit of French. Brexit for me is an anathema. It's all about this little thing, isn't it? All about this. Now, I'm lucky because I can now apply for a French passport. Not going to affect me. I'm going to become a Frenchman. That's my exit strategy, my Brexit strategy. Both my girls, by the way, have German boyfriends. Interesting. They have French nationality and they're going to have German boyfriends. Very interesting setup. So we're not the people that are going to be impacted necessarily by Brexit. But a lot of the students that we represent, and many of the Europeans that we have working, and non-British people that we have working amongst us, will be impacted in ways that we simply don't understand. And that is deeply troubling and deeply worrying, because I have to say this, one of the glorious things, one of the fantastic things about working in the city in my industry has been the immense diversity of cultural experience. And that is one of the strengths of London. It is more diverse than any other city in the world. And God knows I've traveled to enough big cities. As a banker, I've been all over everywhere. And I can tell you one of the fascinating things about where I work today is the lack of diversity and the challenge that that represents. It's a fascinating, fascinating time for us all to be doing what we're doing, and me in particular, with my point in my career. One of the things I do is I get out and I do talk to a lot of students. So I think one of the things I can tell you honestly, I've been involved in the milk rounds, the graduate recruitment process, the whole assessment centre thing. RBS used to have a ferocious obstacles course style, whole day long torture session for the poor youngsters that used to come in, where we used to grill them and fry them and bake them and goodness knows what else. Horrendous. I did all of that. I'm involved, in fact, in the inductions, even in my current job. I'm trying to help people as they come into and adjust to a new culture, a new environment. I do a lot of training as well, trying to explain in words that everyone can understand what it is we do. What is a debt capital markets financial institution specialist when he or she is at home? Pretty big ask, actually. One of the questions I ask my students, that I was saying earlier, when I go and lecture, I'm a visiting fellow at Reading University, Henley Business School. I also lecture at Birmingham Business School. A question I always ask the students, there's always one that wants to be a derivatives trader. And I asked that person, wherever they are from, I want you to go and talk to your grandma and explain what derivatives trading is all about. And if you fail, you fail. Because a grandmother is generally the most intelligent, clever person in a family, even if they haven't had much of an education. They will understand if you make it understandable, make the effort and try. There is nothing in financial services that cannot be properly made clear in basic plain English, or whatever your native tongue might be, which is often Chinese or Hindi or some other language, given the mix of the students I often address. Let me just talk about Brexit quickly. I mean, look, I don't know who here, but I daren't ask the question these days, who is for Brexit? Because increasingly I ask that question and no hands go up, but there's often in circles, unexpectedly, there is a hand that goes up. And I always say, look, I show respect for that. But just for the record, though I may be a banker and we're not very popular as bankers, somewhere near parking attendants and traffic wardens and estate agents, maybe even below them. But nevertheless, I was very involved in the campaign. I was a spokesman for Stronger In. And then I took to the stage for a while, before I joined my current employer, to campaign against Brexit and for a second referendum. So that's where I come from. I cannot tell you today any more than anybody else what's really going to happen. We don't know. I wish Dominic Grieve well with his attempts to divert the current direction of travel of the government. But we have a political class that has let us down in so very many ways. And they've let down the educational system also in so many ways. And we as practical people, you recruiters, we in industry, we have to be clear about what we want, and we have to find our own way through this mess. I can see no opportunity or good opportunity for Brexit, but if it happens, and God knows I hope it does not, but if it does happen, it does throw open again the question around who we're recruiting and how. Because when I joined the industry back in September of 1981, that's when I came out of university, freshly minted student, German industry and language and culture and everything spinning in my head. I looked around and I found an immense diversity of students with me. People with all sorts of backgrounds, academic backgrounds. But what then happened over the next 20, 30 years is we lost them, because all of a sudden the Americans came in and said, we're going to recruit internationally the best from all the top schools around the world. And they did. And here are our criteria. We want people who are going to be numerate, clever, bright, top scoring. But of course what we lost were a lot of the other skills that we heard about, the communications, the empathy. And one of the things we've also forgotten is, in our industry, is how to manage people. With all these brilliant young people coming in with their numeracy skills, they don't have, in many cases, and I can vouch for this, they're not good with people. Even the people like me, my job was client-facing all my life, and I find myself teaching people how to deal with people because they don't have those skills. And that's one of the things that troubles me deeply, and why I have been on a bit of a one-man mission crusade to say to HR people, to say to the industry, look, let's rebalance. Let's look again at what our selection criteria are. Let us think very carefully about what we really need. I look at industry. This appeared in Financial News just recently. It's a very typical headline. And what does it say? Investment banks just to hire maths whizzes and quant experts. In fact, we've been doing this. This is exactly what we've been doing for 30 years. And there lies part of the problem, in my view, in our industry. Let me just come back to this Brexit point again. And of course, my wife is French. She is a derivatives specialist. She's highly numerate. If you asked her to come and do this, she would die. It's not what she does, not what she likes doing. So I looked around the city. Many of the people in derivatives and highly numerate functions are French. Any French people here today? No French people. But their educational system does mean that maths is a vital component of learning. I would have been hopeless if I had grown up as a Frenchman. At my age now, it's safe to become a Frenchman, I think. Should I put on my yellow jacket and go and lob a brick at somebody? Just as an aside, by the way, we mobilised about 750,000 people to protest against Brexit on the streets of London, and there wasn't a single arrest or act of violence, not one. The French want to put up diesel tax, and the entire country comes to a halt with acts of violence. Extraordinary, isn't it? What does that tell you? Maybe not all is not actually lost for the British people and the culture that we represent after all. But we are also, beyond this concern, we've got to do something about it. At the end of the day, we can't just say, this is terrible, it's awful, it's a mess, we may or may not be able to revive. If Brexit goes through, we then do have an issue. It is an issue that does revolve around this thing here, because in various ways, we will not be recruiting people from the European Union or elsewhere. We have no idea. One of the concerns the city generally has. We will not know whether we will be able to bring in people. So, what does that mean? We can look again at what we've got. And when we look at what we've got is not bad. But we will need to rejig the assessment criteria. We will need to look again at what we actually want. So, in a sense, what I'm saying to everybody is, now, look, stop. This is a good moment, regardless of what happens with Brexit, to stop and ask ourselves, what do we really want? And to this point here, those soft skills, those communication skills, are definitely part of what we need and what we want. And by the way, they help in other ways, because the minute you start opening the doors to humanities graduates, all of a sudden you get a lot more women. But I used to go to all of these milk rounds as Merrill Lynch or whoever I was representing, and I was always astonished that they were all men, very culturally diverse, but they were all science, economics, business, engineering, technical skills. And I used to ask, where are the humanities graduates? Where are the women? Why are they not coming? And partly that was because we as an industry have never set out our stall in a way that says, we need your skills, we need what you do. My argument is, if you are a good linguist, you will have studied literature, you will have understood the thinking of people and understood and dissected motivation and emotion and context and many other things. You would have thought critically about how people act. You know what? That's a skill set that's brilliant for going to sell products to customers. I had to speak at my old school a few months ago about the need for languages. The study of German has fallen off a cliff in this country. When I went to university, we had a very strong cohort of mainly women, but also a few of us men who were studying German. Try and find a German speaker who's a native Brit today, it's extremely challenging. This is a problem. And I often argue, well, you know, people say to me, why do I want to bother with German? It sounds difficult, it is difficult, what's the point? My answer to that is, it doesn't matter if it's German or it doesn't matter if it's French, that's not the point. Think about the other challenges we have. Think about who I represent, who employs me today. Think about the world, forget about Brexit for a moment, think about the world that we are all, and they, the students, are going out into. It's a very multicultural world, but when I say multicultural, I mean non-Anglo-Saxon culture. We, as a business, have been an Anglo-Saxon culture, dominated by American business practices and thinking for 30, 40, 50 years. This is coming to an end. Part of my job at the Royal Bank of Scotland was liaising with teams that we had supporting us in the front line that were based in India. I was out in Mumbai and Delhi. And when I talk to students, wherever they may be, I say, that experience is scary in one respect. When you go into a room full of young graduates in India whose English is perfectly good once you've attuned your ear. And they're brilliant. These are extremely motivated, very clever people. Extremely clever and motivated. And probably more brilliant than the students that we have back here. Mark my words. Mark my words. That is the competition that everyone faces for tomorrow in a global economy, regardless of what happens with Brexit, regardless of whatever some of the politicians here want to do in terms of pulling up the portcullis and deepening the channel and reinstating the barbed wire, whatever it is they want to do. That is the reality. And I haven't even mentioned China. And I look around the office where I work today, 65% Chinese, 35% foreign in the London operation. This is a bank with 350,000 employees, one of the top 30 banks in the world. It is enormous. And again, the young boys and girls that I find I'm working with, my department, we have 5 Western people and 6 Chinese people. These people are brilliant. They're extremely highly educated and clever, speak fluent English. And go back to the Indians I was dealing with. Each one of them will speak 3 languages fluently. English is the educational language. They probably speak Hindi, the lingua franca, and they will speak their own regional language. It's not a dialect, it is a language. India has something like 22 national languages, of which English is one. But that mental dexterity, that ability to operate in different cultures, in different languages, is a gift. It is a talent. And the British people, through their educational system and through our biases, we're now putting all of our graduates at a significant disadvantage in a world which is multilingual and multicultural, even if English is the standard operating language, as increasingly it is. It is no longer our English. It is no longer the language that we think we speak. And of course, in a few years' time, maybe, who knows, 25, 30 years, the economic weight of the world will have shifted. Some estimates suggest that 50% of world GDP, half of it will be split between China and India. The United States will be 3rd place. The entirety of the European Union, somewhere behind that again. Just stop and think about that. That is a real challenge. And again, coming with that is this question of what is the business culture which we all need to solve for. These are fairly profound thoughts. In the city, historically, we've been brilliant at actually figuring out where the culture is going and determining what that culture is. Yes, based on Anglo-Saxon American business thinking, but we've exported it all over the world. We've actually had people adopt it. In the work that I've done with regulators worldwide, talking about banking regulations, it's amazing how successful we have been standardizing and getting agreement right the way across the globe, from the Far East to the United States, through all parts of Europe, because we all speak a similar language and have similar understanding for how our industry works. Not something that the politicians recognize or even want to give us credit for, but we have done it. You talk about green finance, a major part of what I have to worry about these days. The green bond principle is another tremendous success that the finance industry has managed to achieve internationally, even though you've got people like Trump and others causing major disruption to the way in which we do business. Nevertheless, the industry has been successful. And we want people coming into our industry who can bring skills that communicate, they are diplomatic, they understand people, they can go out there and adjust to the cultural shifts and the business priorities. And that is something which may be difficult to find. But let me tell you, humanities students are strong in all of these things, and I would love to see more of them. And we talked about promotions and management, and let me touch upon that, because I think I represent one of the poorest managed industries in the world. And I don't just mention the crisis and the ongoing problems at banks, which are all too obvious and grab our headlines. But people get promoted for all the wrong reasons. Rainmakers generally are not great managers. They're not good with people. Our industry is not good with people. We waste talent, we destroy talent unnecessarily. And again, I think if more thought went into how we recruit and how we promote subsequently, how we manage people's career progression, which frankly in financial services, in many places we have not. If we can think more about that, then I think the whole industry will have a significantly better result. Now, I could go on and work some of these themes for a much longer period of time, but I know we are limited on the time, and I'm limited on the time. I have to rush back and have some interesting meetings. But of course, the question is, what do we do next? What do we change? How do we change it? And of course, this is very difficult. I work with some of the trade associations in the city. I'm talking to UK Finance. I'm talking to City UK. I represent the International Capital Market Association. There are all sorts of trade bodies that are looking at these things and beginning to think about them actively. And diversity is something that really is very important, not just academic diversity, not just gender diversity, but I mean, we in the city want diversity because the rest of the world is diverse, and if this economic and cultural pivot is imminent, we need to be ready for it in terms of the kinds of people that we employ. And again, with another one of my hats, last night I was talking to 17 and 18-year-olds from inner city London schools, people who have no understanding of the city. We were at an awards-giving event where we were recognizing youngsters who'd written essays about working in the city. And it was obvious to me reading these essays that they really didn't know what we did, they didn't understand what we do. They kind of saw the city as being right next to their school and yet a million miles away as a world. And these are some of the skills that, well, we need to foster in them, but the understanding of what we do and help them find their way. And I'm delighted to say that we've instigated some work experience sessions for some of the winners of the competition from last night. Tangible things that we as an industry can offer and need to offer far more of. And I'll just finish, I think, by saying a couple of words about that diversity, because I'm going to just quote one line from one of the many essays I read prior to this competition. Again, a sixth former from an inner city London school. And it's really on the theme, it mentions the word Brexit, and it talks about diversity, and it talks about skills. And this young lady said, with Brexit threatening the state of ethnic diversity in the capital, reducing unconscious bias and introducing more diversity schemes has never been more important to us. You know what, I thought that's pretty good from a 17 or 18-year-old from one of these inner city schools. But then again, these are smart, intelligent people with smart, intelligent skill sets. And I see a level of articulacy here that frankly I do not see in even seasoned and senior bankers around me day to day. And that tells me I would love these people if we can get them in somehow. That's not down to me, but collectively all of us in the room, whatever industry we represent, it is down to us. And we should definitely be looking again to see why are we hiring, what are we hiring, and what messages are we sending out to the students? Why are they not applying? What is it they understand that we do? And how do we get them to turn up to the milk round, turn up to the interviews? And how do we make it a little bit easier and more enjoyable and encourage them to come? Because I think that is something we all need to do. I think with that, I'm going to say questions now, and I will not talk any more about Brexit.
Thank you very much, Tim. With so much change going on in this country, let alone Europe and the world, I hope Tim has crystallised some of the challenges that we face. If we can be brave enough to change some of our habits, we won't get ahead of this curve. There's a lot to take in, but very, very insightful and inspiring. Thank you very much. I'm sure you'll agree that was an extremely insightful speech by Tim Skeet from Bank of China. Huge thank you to him and also to King's College for kindly hosting our GRN event. Our next event in 2019 is scheduled for March the 7th. If you'd like to come along and join us, please email me, dan@grb.uk.com. See you next time.